Number 1. O.J. Simpson. He was one of the most recognizable faces in America, an NFL legend, movie star, media personality, and a symbol of fame and success. For years, Orenthal James Simpson seemed untouchable, a man whose charm, wealth, and reputation placed him above scandal. But in June of 1994, his name would be tied to something darker than anything Hollywood or football could script. What began as a brutal crime scene in an upscale Los Angeles neighborhood quickly spiraled into one of the most watched and controversial cases in American history. Before the headlines turned his name into a courtroom fixture, O.J. Simpson was celebrated nationwide. Born in 1947 and raised in San Francisco, he became a college football superstar at USC, later winning the Heisman Trophy. His NFL career with the Buffalo Bills made him a sports icon, and companies lined up to feature him in commercials. After retiring from the league, he transitioned seamlessly into acting, sports commentary, and television. To the public, he was charismatic, successful, and admired. But behind the polished image, his personal life carried tension, especially his relationship with Nicole Brown. O.J. met Nicole in 1977 while still married to his first wife. After his divorce, he and Nicole married in 1985 and had 2 children. Their marriage, however, was far from peaceful. Police were called to their home multiple times due to domestic disputes, including a 1,989 incident where Nicole reported being physically attacked. Simpson pleaded no contest to spousal abuse, but the consequences were minimal. The marriage ended in divorce in 1992, though they continued to see each other on and off. Friends and family later described years of volatility, jealousy, and control. Everything changed on the night of the 12th of June 1994. Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend, Ron Goldman, were found dead outside her condominium in Brentwood, Los Angeles. The scene was shocking: bloody footprints, signs of a violent struggle, and deep wounds on both victims. Detectives quickly focused on O.J. Simpson due to his history with Nicole and the timeline of events. The following days saw mounting evidence: blood drops at the scene matching Simpson's type, a bloody glove on his property, and cuts visible on his hand. When police attempted to bring him in for questioning on June 17, Simpson did not show up. Instead, he fled in a white Ford Bronco driven by his friend Al Cowlings. What followed became one of the most surreal television events in history. For nearly 2 hours, millions watched as the Bronco slowly traveled Los Angeles highways, with police cars following at a distance. Highways emptied, news channels cut into live programming, people gathered on overpasses with signs. Eventually, Simpson returned to his home and surrendered. The trial that followed became known as the Trial of the Century. It began in January 1995 and lasted for 9 months. The prosecution presented physical evidence: DNA from blood samples, hair fibers, the gloves, and footprints traced to a rare shoe brand supposedly owned by Simpson. They argued he had both motive and opportunity, and that his history of domestic violence established a clear pattern. The defense, led by Johnny Cochran, Robert Shapiro, F. Lee Bailey, and others, countered by attacking the integrity of the investigation. They focused heavily on LAPD detective Mark Furman, accusing him of racism and evidence tampering. Cochran's famous line, "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit," referred to the glove that appeared too small when Simpson tried it on in court. The trial wasn't just legal, it was cultural. It exposed tensions surrounding race, celebrity influence, police credibility, and media sensationalism. Television ratings soared. Court moments were replayed daily. Viewers debated the case at work, at home, and in public spaces. Nearly everyone in the country knew the names involved. On the 3rd of October 1995, the jury delivered its verdict: not guilty on both counts of murder. Gasps, cheers, anger, and disbelief followed across the nation. Some believed justice had prevailed. Others saw it as a failure of the system. The legal battle, however, did not end there. In 1997, the victims' families filed a wrongful death civil lawsuit. Unlike a criminal trial, the burden of proof was lower. The jury found Simpson liable for the deaths of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman and ordered him to pay $33.5 million in damages. While he avoided prison at that time, the judgment cemented his responsibility in the eyes of many. Over the years that followed, Simpson's public reputation never recovered. His attempts to profit from the case, like the infamous "If I Did It" book, sparked controversy and outrage. Then, in 2007, he was arrested in Las Vegas for a robbery involving sports memorabilia he claimed was stolen from him. In 2008, he was convicted of armed robbery and kidnapping and sentenced to up to 33 years in prison. He served 9 before being paroled in 2017. To this day, the case of O.J. Simpson remains one of the most divisive and discussed legal stories in American history. It marked a turning point for televised trials, celebrity accountability, and how the justice system is perceived. For some, it highlighted bias and police misconduct. For others, it was a glaring example of fame protecting the powerful. While Simpson lived out his final years away from the spotlight, the debate surrounding his case never truly faded. Whether viewed as a failed prosecution, a wrongful acquittal, or a flawed legal spectacle, the story left an imprint that shaped public opinion for decades. And as the nation kept that memory alive, it would soon confront another famous face whose actions in Hollywood would lead to a conviction with no ambiguity. Number 2. Phil Spector. Before his name became tied to one of the most notorious criminal cases in the entertainment world, Phil Spector was considered a musical genius. Born in 1939, he rose to fame in the 1,960 seconds as a revolutionary record producer. He created the iconic Wall of Sound, a layered recording technique that transformed songs into grand, immersive experiences. He worked with legendary artists like the Ronettes, the Beatles, Tina Turner, and the Righteous Brothers. Songs he produced topped charts worldwide, and his influence echoed through generations of musicians. But as success grew, so did signs of instability, isolation, and unpredictable behavior. By the 1,970 seconds and 1,980 seconds, Spector had withdrawn from the spotlight, becoming reclusive and difficult to work with. Stories circulated about his paranoia and temper. Some described him as brilliant but volatile. Rumors also emerged of his obsession with firearms. Women who had spent time with him later claimed he would threaten them or display guns when he felt insecure or out of control. Still, his fame and legacy overshadowed most warning signs. On the night of the 3rd of February 2003, Phil Spector met Lana Clarkson, an actress and model who was working as a hostess at the House of Blues in Los Angeles. Clarkson had starred in films during the 1,980 seconds but was working smaller jobs at the time. Spector visited the venue, and after talking with her, she accompanied him back to his mansion in Alhambra, California. What happened inside the home became the center of years of legal battles and media speculation. In the early hours of the morning, a 911 call came from the residence. Security personnel reported that a woman had been injured. Police arrived to find Lana Clarkson dead in the foyer with a gunshot wound to her mouth. Spector told his driver, who was outside at the time, "I think I just killed somebody." When questioned by authorities, Spector claimed that Clarkson had taken her own life and that he had nothing to do with it. But investigators were skeptical almost immediately. The evidence contradicted his statements. Clarkson's body position, the blood spatter patterns, and the placement of the gun suggested someone else was involved. There were no signs that she had handled the weapon in a way consistent with suicide. Additionally, forensic experts noted that the gun appeared to have been fired at close range by another person. Investigators also collected accounts from several women who claimed that Spector had threatened them with guns in the past when they tried to leave his home. Spector was arrested but released on bail shortly after. The case attracted massive attention not only because of his fame, but because it tapped into a long history of allegations that had never gone to trial. In 2007, his first criminal trial began. Prosecutors argued that Spector had a history of using firearms to control or intimidate women, and that Clarkson was killed when she resisted him. The defense maintained that she was depressed and acted on her own. The trial stretched on for months and ended in a mistrial after the jury could not reach a verdict. In 2008, prosecutors announced that they would retry the case. The second trial began in October of that year and featured even more evidence. Several women testified that Spector had previously pulled guns on them in situations that closely resembled the night Clarkson died. Forensic experts detailed the trajectory of the bullet, residue evidence, and witness accounts to support the prosecution's version of events. In April 2009, the jury reached a verdict. Phil Spector was convicted of second-degree murder in the death of Lana Clarkson. He was also found guilty of using a firearm in the commission of the crime. The conviction marked a dramatic and permanent fall from grace. Once hailed as one of the most important figures in music history, he was now labeled a violent offender. He was sentenced to 19 years to life in prison. At the time of sentencing, he was in his late 60s and suffering from various health issues. Appeals were filed over the years, but no rulings overturned the conviction. He eventually served his sentence in California State Prison, largely out of the public eye. Lana Clarkson's family spoke publicly after the conviction, expressing relief that the case had reached its conclusion. They had fought for years to clear her name from claims that she had ended her own life. The ruling also prompted renewed discussions in the entertainment industry about power, abuse, and accountability. Phil Spector died in prison in January 2021 at the age of 81. Even in death, his legacy remained complicated. His contributions to music were undeniable, but they now existed in the shadow of a violent crime and a life marked by control and instability. His case showed how fame can delay consequences but not erase them. And, in the realm of high-profile names whose reputations collided with violence, the next story would come from the world of professional sports, where a rising star's life turned from touchdowns to tragedy. Number 3. Aaron Hernandez. He had what many would call a dream trajectory. Aaron Hernandez was a standout athlete from a young age, celebrated in his hometown of Bristol, Connecticut, and later admired nationwide for his talent on the football field. By his early 20s, he was a rising star in the NFL, playing for the New England Patriots and securing a $40 million contract extension. To the public, he looked like a man on a path to long-term success, but beneath the spotlight, darker currents were moving, ones that would soon place him at the center of a murder case that stunned both sports fans and the nation. Hernandez was born in 1989 and raised in a family where athletic excellence was encouraged. He excelled at football in high school and went on to play at the University of Florida, where he helped his team win a national championship. Despite his achievements, there were early signs of trouble: reports of fights, off-field behavior complications, and concerns about the people he associated with. Still, his skill overshadowed the warnings. In 2010, the New England Patriots drafted him, and he quickly became one of their top tight ends, forming a dangerous offensive duo with Rob Gronkowski. By 2012, Hernandez appeared to be living the lifestyle many only imagine. He had a fiancée, a daughter, a new home, and financial security. But off the field, he continued to associate with friends linked to criminal circles. He was seen at clubs and gatherings with individuals who were later tied to violence and weapons investigations. Some teammates and coaches noticed a shift in his behavior, but few had any idea of what would soon unfold. On the 17th of June 2013, the body of Odin Lloyd was found in an industrial area in North Attleboro, Massachusetts. He had been shot multiple times. Lloyd was a semi-professional football player and was dating the sister of Hernandez's fiancée, Shayana Jenkins. Surveillance footage, cell phone data, and witness statements quickly placed Hernandez in contact with Lloyd shortly before the killing. Investigators also found that a rental car linked to Hernandez was connected to the crime scene. As evidence mounted, law enforcement focused their attention on Hernandez. On the 26th of June 2013, he was arrested at his home, still wearing t-shirt and shorts. The Patriots released him within hours. The arrest sent shockwaves through the sports world. Here was a player at the peak of his career, now facing a murder charge in a case tied closely to his personal life. The trial captured national attention. Prosecutors argued that Hernandez orchestrated and carried out the killing of Odin Lloyd, possibly over a perceived slight or fear of disloyalty. They presented text messages Lloyd sent to relatives shortly before his death, expressing concern about being with Hernandez. Surveillance footage from Hernandez's own home showed him holding what appeared to be a gun shortly after the time of the killing. Although the murder weapon was never recovered, Other forensic evidence, including shell casings and tire tracks, supported the case against him. The defense insisted there was no direct proof. Hernandez pulled the trigger and attempted to cast doubt on the timeline and motivations presented by prosecutors. They suggested that others could have been responsible, or that the case lacked certainty. But the accumulation of circumstantial and digital evidence made the prosecution's argument strong. In April 2015, the jury returned its verdict. Aaron Hernandez was convicted of first-degree murder in the death of Odin Lloyd. Under Massachusetts law, he received a mandatory sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. The conviction marked a stunning fall. Just 3 years earlier, he had played in the Super Bowl. Even after his conviction, Hernandez remained tied to other investigations. He was charged in connection with a 2012 double homicide in Boston involving Daniel De Abreu and Safiro Furtado. Prosecutors claimed he opened fire on them after a nightclub encounter. In 2017, he was tried for that case and was acquitted. However, legal battles and appeals connected to the Lloyd case continued behind the scenes. Just days after the acquittal in the double homicide case, Hernandez was found dead in his prison cell on the 19th of April 2017. He was 27. Officials ruled that he died by suicide. Following his death, medical examinations revealed that he had severe chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, a brain condition linked to repeated head trauma, raising questions about how it may have influenced his behavior. The case of Aaron Hernandez remains one of the most shocking intersections of sports fame and violent crime in American history. It served as a wake-up call for the NFL and other sports organizations about player conduct, mental health, and the impact of hidden off-field issues. For many, his story is remembered as a collision of opportunity, impulse, and tragedy that ended in loss for everyone involved. As his name faded from headlines, another athlete made global news for a killing that raised its own storm of questions and disbelief. Number 4. Oscar Pistorius. Before his name became the subject of court hearings and media scrutiny, Oscar Pistorius was celebrated around the world as a symbol of perseverance and athletic achievement. Born in 1,986 inches, South Africa, with a congenital condition that led to the amputation of both legs below the knee when he was just 11 months old, he overcame enormous challenges to become one of the most famous Paralympians in history. Known as the Blade Runner because of his carbon fiber prosthetic legs, he not only dominated Paralympic events, but made history by competing against able-bodied athletes at the 2012 London Olympics. Sponsors praised him, fans adored him, and he appeared in magazines, advertisements, and interviews across the globe. To many, he represented inspiration and grit. But in 2013, his story would shift from admiration to shock when a violent death inside his home shattered his legacy. On the 14th of February 2013, police were called to Pistorius's home in Pretoria, South Africa. Inside the bathroom, they found Riva Steenkamp, his girlfriend, with fatal gunshot wounds. Steenkamp, a well-known model and law graduate, had been dating Pistorius for several months. The two were considered a high-profile couple, frequently photographed at events and featured in the press. That morning, neighbors reported hearing shouting or loud noises before the gunfire. Pistorius claimed that he had mistaken her for an intruder and fired through the locked bathroom door in fear. But investigators were skeptical from the start. According to Pistorius's version of events, he awoke during the night and believed someone had broken into his home. He said he grabbed his gun and fired multiple shots through the closed bathroom door without realizing Steenkamp was inside. Prosecutors, however, argued that the prying Vivas shooting followed an argument and that he intentionally fired at her. The case quickly became an international media spectacle due to his fame, her public profile, and the dramatic nature of the incident. The trial began in March 2014 and was broadcast on television, drawing viewers from around the world. Prosecutors presented ballistic evidence, witness testimony from neighbors, and forensic analysis to show that Steenkamp was standing behind the door when she was hit by the shots. They also described previous incidents where Pistorius had displayed reckless behavior with firearms. Witnesses recounted hearing screams before the shots, alleging that a conflict preceded the shooting. The defense maintained that Pistorius was deeply fearful of crime, a widespread concern in South Africa, and acted in what he thought was self-defense. They emphasized his disability, arguing that his vulnerability without his prosthetic legs intensified his fear. Pistorius took the stand and wept often, expressing remorse and insisting he had no intention of killing Steenkamp. In September 2014, the judge delivered the verdict. Pistorius was found guilty of culpable homicide, a charge comparable to manslaughter. He was later sentenced to 5 years in prison, but he served only about 1 year before being released to house arrest. However, prosecutors appealed, arguing that the verdict did not match the severity of the evidence. In December 2015, South Africa's Supreme Court of Appeal overturned the culpable homicide ruling and replaced it with a conviction for murder. The court determined that firing multiple shots through a closed door, knowing someone was behind it, demonstrated intent. In July 2016, Pistorius was sentenced to 6 years in prison for murder. Then, after another appeals process, his sentence was increased in 2017 to 13 years and 5 months. As the years passed, Pistorius's public image transformed entirely. Endorsements disappeared, his athletic career ended, and his once heroic reputation was overshadowed by the tragedy and legal outcome. Meanwhile, Riva Steenkamp's family continued to speak about her life, plans, and the grief that followed her death. They expressed that the punishment could never match the loss they suffered. Pistorius remained incarcerated at Atteridgeville Correctional Center near Pretoria. In late 2023, South African authorities granted him parole after he had served more than half his sentence, in line with the country's legal guidelines for certain offenders. His release led to renewed public debate about justice, remorse, and the role of fame in legal proceedings. The case continues to hold attention as an example of how a celebrated figure can fall from grace with irreversible consequences. For many, it raised questions about gun ownership, gender-based violence, and the pressures of celebrity life. And as headlines started to shift away from the fallen Olympian, another actor, one beloved for roles on screen, would find his life defined not by fame, but by the crime for which he was convicted. Number 5. Michael Jace. To most people, Michael Jace was a familiar face long before his name appeared in courtrooms and headlines. He was best known for playing Officer Julian Lowe on the television series The Shield, a character known for restraint and morality. Jace also made appearances in other films and shows, building a career as a steady working actor in Hollywood. But on the night of the 19th of May 2014, his real life shattered any separation between fiction and reality. That evening, a domestic confrontation inside his Los Angeles home led to a killing that stunned both the entertainment industry and the public. Before the tragedy, Jace lived what seemed like an ordinary life outside the spotlight. He was born in 1962 and gradually transitioned into acting in the 1,990 seconds. His career wasn't marked by scandals or public breakdowns. He married his first wife in the early 1,990 seconds, but their relationship ended in divorce. In 2003, he married April Jace, a schoolteacher and mother of 2. Friends and colleagues often described her as warm, gentle, and deeply devoted to her children. While the family appeared stable, later reports would reveal financial problems and growing tension behind closed doors. On the night of the incident, police received a 911 call from Jace himself. During that call, he stated that he had shot his wife. When officers arrived at the residence in the Hyde Park area of Los Angeles, they found April Jace in their home with multiple gunshot wounds. The couple's 2 young sons were present in the house when it happened. Paramedics were unable to save her, and she was pronounced dead at the scene. Investigators immediately took Jace into custody for questioning. The details that emerged in the days that followed painted a picture of a marriage strained by conflict. Reports showed that the family was dealing with debt and foreclosure proceedings, and prosecutors believed that arguments over money played a significant role in the confrontation. Jace was formally charged with murder, and the case quickly became a major story in entertainment news outlets due to his recognizable career and the shocking nature of the crime. During the trial, prosecutors presented evidence that Jace acted deliberately and in anger. They revealed that he shot April multiple times, including once in the back. They described the shooting as driven by rage and jealousy. Testimony from friends and relatives emphasized that April had been a loving mother with no history of aggression. The presence of the children during the shooting intensified the weight of the charges. The defense did not dispute that Jace was responsible for the shooting, but they attempted to argue that he acted in a sudden emotional outburst rather than with premeditation. They claimed that he had not planned the killing and was overwhelmed in the moment. Despite these efforts, the prosecution maintained that the evidence, including the positioning of the shots and the 911 call, indicated intention. In May 2016, nearly 2 years after the shooting, a jury convicted Michael Jace of second-degree murder. Before the sentencing, members of April's family spoke in court, describing their loss and the impact on her children. Her mother and relatives emphasized the devastation left behind and the irreplaceable role she played in their lives. The judge sentenced Jace to 40 years to life in prison. Under California law, this meant he would be eligible for parole only after serving decades behind bars. For many following the case, the conviction was seen as a tragic end to a life that had once seemed defined by opportunity and success. For others, it underscored a painful reality that domestic violence can occur even in households that appear calm and ordinary from the outside. The children, who were present during the killing, were placed in the care of relatives. Their lives became shaped not only by the loss of their mother, but by the knowledge that their father was the one who caused it. Friends of April Jace highlighted her positive influence as a teacher and mother and spoke of her dedication to family and community. As time passed, the story of Michael Jace faded from the front pages, but its impact remained. It served as another reminder that fame offers no shield against accountability. When the trial concluded, many reflected on the contrast between his on-screen portrayals and the reality of his actions at home. And while his conviction ended one Hollywood tragedy, the next case would involve another famous actor whose trial carried eerie parallels. Number 6. Robert Blake. For decades, Robert Blake was a recognizable figure in American entertainment. Born in 1933, he began his acting career as a child, appearing in the Our Gang comedy shorts before transitioning into adult roles. In the 1,970 Seconds, he gained widespread acclaim playing the CDAC title character in the television series Beretta, a tough but streetwise detective. His gritty performances earned him both fame and respect in Hollywood. Off-screen, he lived a quieter, more private life, but his name would eventually be linked to one of the most controversial murder cases in celebrity history. In the late 1,990 Seconds, Blake met Bonnie Lee Bakley, a woman known for pursuing relationships with famous men. She had been married multiple times and had a history of legal disputes. Blake and Bakley began a relationship marked by distrust and tension. In 2000, she became pregnant and claimed the child was his. Although Blake initially doubted the paternity, a DNA test confirmed that he was the father. The two married that year, but their relationship remained strained. Friends later said Blake felt trapped and uncomfortable in the marriage, while Bakley confided in others about her unease around him. On the night of the 4th of May, 2001, Blake and Bakley had dinner at Vitello's, an Italian restaurant in Studio City, California. After the meal, they walked to Blake's car, which was parked nearby. Blake claimed that after helping Bakley into the passenger seat, he walked back to the restaurant to retrieve a handgun he said he had left inside. According to his account, when he returned to the vehicle, he found her shot in the head. Paramedics arrived quickly, but Bakley was pronounced dead shortly after. From the beginning, investigators were skeptical of Blake's story. The gun he claimed he had gone back to retrieve was not the weapon used in the shooting. The murder weapon was later found in a dumpster nearby. Additionally, witnesses and acquaintances came forward with allegations that Blake had spoken about wanting Bakley dead. Some claimed he had even tried to hire people to kill her months earlier. In April 2002, nearly a year after the shooting, Robert Blake was arrested and charged with murder, along with solicitation of murder and conspiracy. His longtime bodyguard Earl Caldwell was also arrested but was later cleared of the charges. Prosecutors argued that Blake had orchestrated the killing to free himself from a marriage he resented. The defense countered that he had no reason to kill Bakley and that the crime could have been committed by someone connected to her complicated personal life. The trial began in late 2004 and drew major media coverage. The prosecution presented testimony from stuntmen who said Blake had approached them about killing Bakley. They introduced evidence suggesting premeditation and plotted intent. However, the defense challenged the credibility of those witnesses and emphasized the lack of physical evidence directly linking Blake to the shooting. They argued that his decision to return to the restaurant for a gun showed he was unarmed when the attack occurred. In March 2005, the jury reached its verdict. Robert Blake was acquitted of murder and solicitation charges. While the criminal case ended in his favor, public opinion remained divided. Some believed he was innocent and targeted because of his fame. Others thought he escaped conviction due to weak evidence and legal strategy, but the legal consequences were not over. Later that year, Bakley's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit in civil court. Unlike a criminal trial, civil cases require a lower standard of proof. In November 2005, the jury found Blake liable for Bakley's death and ordered him to pay $30 million in damages. The amount was later reduced, but the judgment financially damaged him. He filed for bankruptcy after the ruling. In the years that followed, Blake largely withdrew from public life. Interviews were rare, and he focused on managing the consequences of the civil judgment. His acting career ended completely, and he became a symbol of a case that sat in the gray area between guilt and acquittal. Robert Blake died in March 2023 at the age of 89. His legacy remained complex, celebrated for his body of work, but forever connected to the death of Bonnie Lee Bakley. The unanswered questions surrounding the case left it open to debate long after the trials ended. And just as his story faded from the headlines, another famous name from the world of music, one tied to chaos, addiction, and violence, had already shocked Los Angeles decades earlier. Number 7. Sid Vicious. In the late 1970s, Sid Vicious became one of the most recognizable faces of the punk rock movement. Born John Simon Ritchie in London in 1957, he adopted the name Sid Vicious after joining the Sex Pistols, a band that helped define the raw, rebellious sound of the era. He wasn't known for musical skill as much as for his image wild, chaotic, and self-destructive. His relationship with Nancy Spungen, an American who had moved to London and become entwined in the punk scene, became infamous. Together, they embodied a volatile mix of love, addiction, and dysfunction that eventually turned deadly. By 1978, the Sex Pistols were unraveling. The band was touring the United States, tensions were high, and Sid's drug use was spiraling out of control. When the tour ended and the band broke apart, he and Nancy moved into the Chelsea Hotel in New York City. The hotel was known as a haven for artists and outsiders, but it was also a place where drug use was rampant and troubles frequently escalated behind closed doors. On the 12th of October 1978, police were called to room 100 of the Chelsea Hotel. There, they found Nancy Spungen lying on the bathroom floor with a stab wound to her abdomen. She was 20 years old. Paramedics could not save her. Sid Vicious, found in the room under the influence of drugs, was taken into custody. He was charged with second-degree murder. At the time, he reportedly gave conflicting statements, at one point claiming he couldn't remember what happened and at another suggesting he might have been responsible. Investigators struggled to piece together the truth. Witnesses described the couple's relationship as deeply troubled and often violent. They were frequently high, and their arguments were loud and public. Some believed Sid attacked Nancy in a drug-fueled rage, while others speculated that someone else entered the room and killed her during a robbery or dispute. The blood evidence and crime scene condition raised questions, but no alternative suspect was definitively identified. Despite being charged, Sid never stood trial. Shortly after his arrest, he was released on bail paid by his record label and friends in the music industry. In the months that followed, his life became even more unstable. He attempted self-harm and faced additional legal trouble, including an arrest for assault after attacking singer Patti Smith's brother with a broken bottle. By early 1979, he was awaiting further proceedings in Nancy's case. On the 2nd of February 1979, Sid Vicious died from a heroin overdose at a friend's apartment in New York. He was 21 years old. The heroin had reportedly been supplied or administered by someone in his circle, and some accounts say it came from a batch far more potent than usual. His death ended any chance of a trial or definitive legal resolution to Nancy Spongeon's killing. Nancy's family always believed Sid was responsible, while some people in the punk community insisted the story was more complicated. Without a trial, the official record remained incomplete. The case was never closed with a conviction, but he remained the sole suspect. The cultural impact of their relationship and the tragedy that ended it was enormous. Films, books, and documentaries portrayed it as a dark symbol of the punk era, a love story consumed by addiction and chaos. The Chelsea hotel room, where Nancy died, became a morbid landmark in music history. Sid Vicious's death froze his image in time. To some, he was a cautionary tale about substance abuse and violence. To others, he remained an emblem of a movement that rejected conformity but couldn't escape its own destruction. Nancy Spongeon's story, meanwhile, became a reminder that behind every mythologized figure, there are real lives and real consequences. Their story ended without closure, and unlike many celebrity trials, it left more questions than answers. But the next case on the list would remove all ambiguity because Skylar DeLeon didn't just face accusations. He was convicted of a crime so calculated and disturbing that the courts had no doubt about his intent. Number 8. Skylar DeLeon. Long before his name became linked to one of the most chilling murder-for-profit schemes in modern California history, Skylar DeLeon had briefly brushed fame. As a child, he appeared in small television roles, including a short appearance on the series Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. But his acting career never took off, and as he grew older, he drifted into financial trouble, deception, and eventually violent crime. What began as a plan to steal ended in a gruesome double murder that shocked the nation and made headlines for years. By the early 2000s, DeLeon was struggling with money and trying to maintain appearances with his wife, Jennifer Henderson, and their young child. Desperate for quick cash and obsessed with gaining wealth through any means, he began targeting people he believed he could manipulate. In 2003, he and his wife learned about Tom and Jackie Hawks, a retired couple who lived aboard their yacht, the Well-Deserved. The Hawkses were known for being kind, hardworking, and family-oriented. After selling their home to buy the boat, they spent their time traveling the coast and visiting their grandchildren. When they decided to sell the yacht to move closer to family, DeLeon saw an opportunity. He contacted the Hawkses, pretending to be a wealthy buyer interested in purchasing their boat. On the 15th of November 2004, DeLeon, his wife, and two accomplices, John F. Kennedy, unrelated to the former president, and Alonzo McChain, went to meet the Hawkses for what seemed like a routine sea trial. Once out on the ocean, the plan unfolded with calculated brutality. The Hawkses were overpowered, tied up, and forced to sign documents transferring ownership of the boat to DeLeon. Instead of sparing their lives, the attackers dragged Tom and Jackie to the back of the yacht, attached weights to them, and pushed them overboard while they were still alive. Their bodies were never recovered. In the weeks that followed, the Hawkses' family grew suspicious after being unable to reach them. Their SUV was found abandoned in Mexico, and their bank accounts showed unusual activity linked to DeLeon. Detectives soon traced the forged transfer documents and financial transactions back to him. Witnesses also came forward, including associates who said DeLeon had talked about killing the couple and disposing of them at sea. Investigators arrested DeLeon in late 2004. As more evidence emerged, it became clear that this was not a single act of violence but part of a broader pattern. DeLeon had also been linked to the 2003 disappearance and killing of John Jarvie, a man whose body was found in Mexico. Jarvie had been stabbed and left by the side of a road, and DeLeon was eventually convicted in that case as well. Jennifer Henderson, DeLeon's wife, was arrested too. Prosecutors stated that she helped plan the yacht murders by handling finances, helping coordinate forgeries, and covering up after the killings. During the investigation, additional accomplices were named, and several cooperated with authorities in exchange for reduced sentences. The trial revealed chilling details. Prosecutors described how the Hawkses were terrorized, tied, and forced to cooperate before being thrown into the Pacific Ocean to drown. The deliberate nature of the act, combined with financial motivation and attempts to cover up the crime, made the case especially disturbing. In 2008, Skylar DeLeon was convicted of 3 counts of murder: Tom Hawks, Jackie Hawks, and John Jarvie. The jury recommended the death penalty, and he was sentenced accordingly. His wife, Jennifer Henderson, received 2 consecutive life sentences without parole for her role in the killings. Accomplices McChain and Kennedy were also convicted, with varying sentences based on their involvement and cooperation. While awaiting trial, DeLeon made headlines again for attempting to sever his genitals with a razor in his jail cell, reportedly as part of a desire to transition. Authorities intervened, and he survived the attempt. Today, he remains on death row in California. The story of Tom and Jackie Hawks left a lasting mark on the public imagination. They were a beloved couple, enjoying their retirement when they were targeted by someone pretending to be a buyer. Their family has spoken often about the pain of their loss and the cruelty of how their lives were taken. The case stood out not only for its violence, but for its calculated nature, an example of how greed and deception can lead to unthinkable actions. As DeLeon's name faded from the spotlight, another figure with a very different background would emerge on the list, someone sentenced not for one killing, but for a trail of crimes that spanned years. Number 9. Sante Kimes. Sante Kimes was not a celebrity in the traditional sense, but by the time law enforcement finally caught up with her, she had become a notorious figure in American crime history. Born in 1934 and raised in poverty, she developed a pattern of manipulation and fraud early in life. Over time, she evolved from small-time scams into larger schemes involving theft, arson, and identity fraud. Her charm and ability to deceive made her particularly dangerous, and as the years went on, her crimes escalated from financial exploitation to murder. What made her story even more disturbing was the involvement of her son, Kenny Kimes, who became her partner in crime. By the 1,990 Sante had built a criminal resume stretching across multiple states. She had been charged before for insurance scams, forced labor, and abuse of domestic workers. In one astonishing case in the 1,980 she was convicted of enslaving undocumented housekeepers and setting fire to her own home for insurance money. She avoided long prison terms through legal maneuvers and manipulation, always finding ways to continue her schemes. Her relationship with her son, Kenneth, added a chilling element to her story. From a young age, he was pulled into her world of deceit and crime. Together, they moved from place to place, using false identities to defraud banks, hotels, and wealthy contacts. But their most infamous crime came in 1998, when they targeted a wealthy New York widow named Irene Silverman. Irene Silverman was a former Radio City Music Hall dancer who owned a multi-million-dollar Manhattan townhouse. Sante and Kenny rented a room in her home under the aliases Manny and Eva Guerin. Their plan was to take over her property and assets by stealing her identity. But when Silverman became suspicious and began making moves to evict them, the situation took a deadly turn. On the 5th of July 1998, Irene Silverman disappeared. Her body was never found. Police investigations revealed that the Kimeses had forged documents to transfer ownership of Silverman's mansion and bank accounts to themselves. When authorities arrested the pair in a stolen car in New Jersey shortly after, they discovered multiple fake IDs, property deeds, and notary stamps. They also found notes and plans that made it clear they intended to assume Silverman's identity. Even without a body, prosecutors had enough evidence to bring murder charges. The case went to trial in 2000. Witnesses described how Sante manipulated her son and controlled every aspect of their criminal life. Prosecutors argued that the pair killed Silverman in her own home, disposed of her remains, and then carried out their plan to take her property. Despite the lack of a recovered body, the jury found both Sante and Kenny guilty of second-degree murder, robbery, burglary, and several other charges. They were each sentenced to 120 years to life in prison. The trial revealed more about their past crimes. Authorities connected them to the 1,998 murder of businessman David Kasdan in Los Angeles. Kasdan had been involved in a property scam with Sante and discovered that she forged his signature on documents. To prevent him from exposing her, he was killed and dumped in a trash bin. Kenny later admitted to shooting Kasdan under his mother's direction. Sante remained defiant even after her conviction. She denied everything and gave interviews claiming innocence, blaming law enforcement and the media. Her controlling personality and cold demeanor caught public attention, leading to documentaries, television specials, and books about her crimes. To many, she became the embodiment of calculated evil, a person willing to eliminate anyone who stood in the way of profit. She died in 2014 inches, a New York prison at the age of 79. Her son, Kenny, remains incarcerated, serving a life sentence with no possibility of parole. In later interviews, he described his mother as manipulative and said that she shaped his entire life around crime. The case of Sante and Kenny Kimes stood out because of its mix of greed, deception, and family involvement. It was a reminder that some of the most shocking crimes don't come from impulsive violence but long-term, deliberate exploitation. Theirs was not a moment of fury, but a lifestyle built on destruction. And while her story was rooted in fraud that escalated into murder, the final case on the list comes from Hollywood once again. Only this time, there would be no trial at all, but a death that left investigators piecing together what happened. Number 10. Johnny Lewis. Johnny Lewis was once seen as a rising actor with a bright future. Born in 1983 and raised in Los Angeles, he began acting as a teenager, landing roles in shows like Drake and Josh, The O.C., and Bones. His most recognized role came later as Kip Halfsack Epps on the hit series Sons of Anarchy. On screen, he played a troubled but loyal character, earning fans and recognition. Off-screen, he was known for his involvement in Scientology and his artistic pursuits. But behind the surface, his life began to take a sharp turn, one marked by mental instability, drug use, and violence. By his late 20s, Lewis's behavior was becoming increasingly erratic. In 2011, he suffered head injuries in a motorcycle accident. Friends and family later suggested that the trauma changed him significantly. Around this time, he faced legal trouble for assault, vandalism, and attempted burglary. He was arrested multiple times, sent to jail, and ordered into rehab programs. Relatives and acquaintances said his decline seemed connected to mental illness or neurological issues, though he was never successfully treated. In early 2012, Lewis split from his girlfriend after the birth of their daughter. Custody issues and financial strain added more pressure to a life already unraveling. Court records showed he struggled to comply with probation terms and treatment programs. Those close to him described a man slipping further into paranoia and volatility. On the 26th of September 2012, events reached a horrifying end. That afternoon, police were called to a neighborhood in Los Feliz, a quiet area near Los Angeles. When they arrived, they found the body of 81-year-old Catherine Davis in her home, where she rented rooms to actors and students. She had been beaten to death. Investigators also found her cat dead from apparent blunt force trauma. Witnesses reported seeing Lewis outside the house shortly after. He had climbed onto a wall, assaulted a neighbor, and attacked a house painter, injuring both. Without warning, he either jumped or fell from the roof or balcony of the property and landed in the driveway of the home next door. He died from the dead fall before paramedics arrived. He was 28 years old. The crime scene inside Davis's home suggested a violent struggle. Police believed Lewis murdered her shortly before his death. With no one else tied to the scene and no signs of forced entry, investigators concluded that he was responsible. However, because he died before any charges or trial, the case never went through the courts. Toxicology reports found no drugs or alcohol in his system at the time of his death, deepening questions about his mental state. Some speculated that untreated brain trauma combined with psychological decline led to a sudden, violent break. Others believed years of behavioral problems had reached a tragic peak. Catherine Davis was remembered as a beloved landlady, known for her kindness and generosity. She was admired by the community and had opened her home to countless aspiring actors over the years. Her death left neighbors and friends devastated and searching for answers. In the aftermath, those who knew Lewis reflected on the sharp contrast between the young actor with career momentum and the troubled man he became. His death did not bring closure in the legal sense, but investigators and prosecutors made clear through evidence that he was responsible for the killing. The case of Johnny Lewis stood apart from others on this list because it ended without trial, conviction, or sentencing. Instead, it left a haunting snapshot of a life derailed by violence and decline, one that ended as abruptly as it turned deadly. And with that, the lineup of celebrity murder cases that captured national attention comes full circle, each one different in motive and outcome, but all marked by intense public scrutiny and the collapse of lives once lived in the spotlight.